Gentlemen, welcome to you all. I think a lot of people woke up this morning shocked. Were warning signs being ignored? Or is this violence that we're seeing surprising to everyone? And I'm going to ask all you that question. Ben, you first for the answer.
Well, yeah, I think what is surprising is the kind of scale and complexity of this attack. We've not seen Hamas undertake something of this ambition where they're acting with so many different tactics in so many different ways. In the past, it's normally been rockets fired into Israel or more discrete attacks. This is clearly a complex, multifaceted attack that would have taken months to plan, would have required them to acquire the kinds of weaponry or equipment that they haven't used in the past. That said, there have clearly been warning signs that there's a tinderbox here. You know, you've had increasing instances of violence between Israelis and Palestinians, settler violence from Israelis in the West Bank, reprisal violence by Palestinians. The situation in Gaza has been a dire humanitarian circumstance for, well, decades now. So the elements were there for some kind of explosion, tragically. And I think that that's something people have anticipated as political despair set in the Palestinians as you had these kinds of clashes. But the scale and complexity of this, I think that is what is shocking people today. And the fact that this seems to have caught Israel somewhat off guard. And now, of course, what people are going to be shocked by are the horrific images of the tragic loss of life in Israel, of these hostages being taken. This is of a scale. We've been through Gaza wars. This is of a scale of something we have not seen before in Gaza and out of Gaza. And I think it's going to completely remake the circumstance politically in terms of the Palestinian leadership. It's obviously entering into a volatile moment in Israeli politics. It's entering into a moment when you have diplomacy between Saudi Arabia and the United States and Israel that is going to get much more complicated. So we are definitely in a new reality today, Alex.
I'm going to get to that diplomacy angle with you in just a moment. But, Admiral, to you, the Iron Dome, its efficacy or lack thereof when it comes to paragliders, hang gliders, that is a new wrinkle. Talk about that and what you think happened here.
It's not designed to go against those kind of targets. So it's a clever move on the part of the Gaza team, if you will. What it is designed to do and is quite good at is knocking down higher speed projectiles coming in. And it can do that very effectively. But at the scale, at least of what's been reported in the 1,000 to 2,000 over what period of time, we don't know. But any air defense system, I've spent my life working on the Aegis air defense system at sea, which is the world-class system. No system can face that kind of saturation. And speaking of which, if you're waking up in Israel this morning, you're very worried about Gaza. But speaking of air defense, you're looking north, because up north is Hezbollah, a creature of Iran that has 130,000 surface-to-surface missiles. So Israel will want to get ahead of that problem. Going to need a lot of assistance from us. And to the initial question you asked, I, for one, was very surprised, bordering on shocked, in the sense that I've always thought of the Israeli intelligence service, the Mossad, the military equivalent, as absolutely superb. First-rate human intelligence, signals intelligence. Hard to believe they missed something of this scale. Final thought here, Alex, for listeners. The scale of this is remarkable. You're going to hear about 20 killed and 40 killed and 60 killed, and that number will go up. What you need to remember is that Israel has a population of only 7 million Jewish citizens. So population-adjusted numbers, when you lose 20 Israelis killed, it's like losing 1,000 Americans. So we're at 3,000 and counting. This is going to approach a 9/11 feel to the Israelis.
Yeah. Which all brings me to you now, again, former CIA Director John Brennan. When it comes to intelligence, the fact that we are all surprised at this level of sophistication, I guess first question to you, how surprised are you? Where did something break down? And do you categorize this as a sophisticated attack?
Absolutely. Sophisticated, multidimensional, well-planned, well-coordinated, unfortunately well-implemented as well. And it really raises questions about Israeli intelligence capabilities in the Gaza Strip. And so I think there's going to be some real questions now among Israeli intelligence leadership about whether or not their source network, as well as their technical collection capabilities, were compromised, and that they were blind to what was going on here, relying on some of those sources that might have been doubled, or they were being fed in disinformation by Hamas because of that intelligence network that exists within the Gaza Strip. So this clearly was a total tactical surprise, what I think has been alluded to. This isn't a strategic surprise because Palestinian militancy, as well as Palestinian anger at what has been happening in Gaza Strip, and also by Bibi Netanyahu basically crushing any type of aspirations of Palestinian statehood. Even though Hamas militants don't represent the bulk of the Palestinians, I think Hamas leadership feels as though they needed to take this aggressive action in order to derail some of the things that were going on in the region, including what appears to be a near-term potential establishment of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And so I think the Palestinian leadership of Hamas decided that on the 50th anniversary of the 73 war, as well as because of what is happening in Israeli domestic politics that are far right, but also regional developments, they needed to bring greater attention immediately to the Palestinian cause.
John, how long do you suppose that an attack like this at this level, multi-pronged, would have been in the works, something they were planning, training for? And do you think there are any other state actors involved here? Is that possible? And if so, who would be most likely?
Well, the idea of this attack might have been incubated as much as a year or more ago, but the extent of the scale and scope of the attack, I think, really requires months-long training, preparation, gathering sufficient munitions, those rockets, overwhelming Israel's Iron Dome system, being able to coordinate the movement in air, ground, and sea. This shows a very strong sophistication, but also compartmentation. The fact that they were able to do this and not have Israeli intelligence gain insight into it. So it's very possible that Hamas's principal outside benefactor, which is Iran, provided them some support. Maybe also from Hezbollah. Palestinian Islamic Jihad was involved in this. But I do think that this was a decision made by Hamas's leadership to go forward with it. But external players and others might have, again, provided the type of support as well as materiel that was necessary in order to carry out this, this attack.